They're using you, Ethan. Those 4 words from my wife, Olivia, hung there heavy, like smoke after a fire. She said them so quietly, almost like she was scared of breaking something delicate between us. We were sitting at our kitchen table, our coffee getting cold while I scrolled through another group chat full of my cousins asking for little favors that never seemed so little anymore. What do you mean using me? I asked, looking up from my phone with that sick feeling already starting in my gut. Olivia pointed at the screen, where message after message lit up with requests. When's the last time any of them called just to talk or invited us over without needing something first? I wanted to fight her on it because this was my family. These were my own blood relatives who I thought loved me unconditionally. There was Uncle Joseph who taught me how to drive when I was 15, Cousin Elizabeth who used to babysit me during summer breaks, and Cousin Rick who stood beside me as my best man just 3 years ago. These people were supposed to love me, but as I sat there staring at my phone, I couldn't for the life of me remember the last time any of them had called just to see how I was doing or how my business was going. Ethan, just look at your bank statements from the last 6 months and really look at what's happening, Olivia said gently, her voice carrying that tone she used when she knew something would hurt but needed to be said anyway. So I pulled up my banking app and those numbers hit me like ice water, each one a betrayal I've been blind to. $2,000 to Joseph for an emergency car repair that somehow never got fixed. $1,500 to Elizabeth for her kids' doctor bills while she posted vacation photos on social media. $800 to Rick for his rent when he was driving around in a brand new truck. And another $3,000 to Aunt Maureen for her mortgage while she bragged about redecorating her kitchen. The list just kept going and going, a trail of my generosity that led to nowhere but to empty promises. But they always pay me back, though, I said, but my voice sounded weak and desperate even to myself, like I was trying to convince myself more than her. Olivia just raised her eyebrow and gave me that look that said she loved me too much to let me keep lying to myself. Do they really, though? When did Joseph pay you back for that car repair from 3 months ago? Or when did Elizabeth give back the money for her daughter's school fees from last spring? I desperately scrolled through my messages, searching for any proof they'd paid me back. Any evidence that I wasn't just their personal ATM, but there was nothing except more and more requests for help with urgent situations that somehow never seemed to get resolved. They're family, Olivia, and family helps family when times get tough. Real family doesn't drain family dry. She shot back, her voice getting firmer. Ethan, you inherited your father's construction business, and you work 16-hour days to keep it running strong. Yet every single month, thousands of dollars just vanish into their pockets like you're some kind of charity. When do you get help back? When did they ever show up for you when you need something? I slammed my phone down on the table hard enough to make our coffee cups rattle. So what are you saying here? I should just ditch my family and turn my back on everyone? Olivia reached across and took my hand, her fingers warm against mine. I'm saying maybe you should test them and see if they care about you as a person or just see you as their personal wallet. How would I even do that? She thought for a moment and then a little smile crossed her face. Not mean, but knowing. Invite them all to a nice dinner this weekend. Let them order whatever they want, have a great time together, and then when the bill comes, tell them you forgot your wallet and ask if they can all chip in to cover it. I just stared at her like she'd suggested we rob a bank. You want me to embarrass myself in front of my whole family like some deadbeat? I want you to see who they really are when the shoe's on the other foot, she said, squeezing my hand. If they really care about you, they'll happily cover a dinner for the men who's been covering their emergencies for years without question. If they don't help you when you need it, well, then you'll know exactly where you stand. The idea felt awful, like bad food sitting heavy in my stomach, but it also made a sick kind of sense that I couldn't ignore. These people had borrowed tens of thousands from me over the years without batting an eye, so surely they could handle splitting one dinner bill between all of them. Fine, I said, feeling like I was about to jump off a cliff. But when they all happily pay, and you're wrong about this from now on, I don't want to hear another word about my family taking advantage of me. Olivia just nodded, but I could see something sad in her eyes. Deal, but Ethan, I really hope I'm wrong too, because I know how much they mean to you.
That Thursday, I sent a text to the family group chat that I'd been part of for years. Hey everyone, want to celebrate the weekend at Romano's Italian? My treat, Saturday 7 p.m.? The replies came flooding in almost instantly, like they'd been waiting by their phones. Joseph, yes, been craving their lobster ravioli for weeks. Elizabeth, count us in, the kids love their pizza and breadsticks. Rick, perfect timing, bro. I've been stressed about work and could use a good meal. Aunt Maureen, so sweet of you, honey. Can I bring Tom along? Within an hour, 12 people had confirmed. 12 people who jumped at the chance for a free fancy meal without even asking what the occasion was. Olivia watched me as I read through all the messages, and her question hit me like a punch to the gut. When's the last time 12 of them showed up when you needed help moving, or when you were sick with pneumonia, or when your dad passed away and you needed support? I thought about it, and the truth made my chest tight. When Dad died 2 years ago, maybe half of them even bothered to come to the funeral, and most of those left right after the service. When Olivia and I bought our house and needed help moving, I had to hire professional movers because suddenly nobody was available to help. And when I had pneumonia last winter and was stuck in bed for a week, not a single one of them checked in on me, or brought soup, or asked if I needed anything. But they were all completely free for lobster ravioli on my dime. Saturday night came quicker than I wanted it to. Romano's was buzzing with energy, warm lights spilling out of the windows and the smell of garlic and fresh bread hitting us as we walked through the doors. I'd booked a table for 14 people, and one by one, they all started to arrive looking like they were ready for a celebration. Joseph showed up wearing a brand new leather jacket, talking loudly about his upcoming vacation to Florida that he'd been planning for weeks. Elizabeth brought her 2 teenagers who were both glued to expensive phones that definitely weren't cheap models. Rick walked in wearing designer sneakers that probably cost more than most people's rent. Aunt Maureen came with her boyfriend Tom, who immediately started bragging about the classic car he was restoring in his garage. Everyone was in a fantastic mood, hugging me tight, thanking me for organizing dinner, and immediately starting to order pricey appetizers, big main courses, and lots of drinks without even glancing at the prices. For a little while, listening to them all laugh and share stories and act like we were the closest family in the world, I almost forgot why we were really there and what this dinner was supposed to prove. Joseph ordered a $40 steak with all the sides. Elizabeth's kids both had $20 pastas plus expensive desserts. Rick went straight for a huge seafood platter with 2 premium cocktails, and Aunt Mermaine and Tom split a $60 bottle of wine like it was nothing. I just sat there watching the orders pile up, my stomach twisting tighter with every expensive dish, watching these people celebrate my generosity while planning to drain every last dollar from it without any thought of what it meant to me. The dinner went on for 2 full hours, with everyone getting more relaxed and happy as the wine flowed. Uncle Joseph was telling detailed stories about his Florida trip plans and all the expensive activities he wanted to do. Elizabeth was showing off pictures of her daughter's newly decorated bedroom that cost thousands to redo. And Rick was going on and on about a motorcycle he wanted to buy next month. All of it paid for with money they'd borrowed from me and never even mentioned paying back. Finally, the server brought the check over in that little black folder. I glanced at the total and my heart just about stopped beating. $438 for one dinner, more money than some people made in a week. I stared at that number for a long moment, feeling the weight of what was about to happen, then looked up at my family while Olivia squeezed my hand under the table for support. "This is really embarrassing," I said, loud enough for everyone at the table to hear me clearly. I completely forgot my wallet at home and left it sitting on my dresser. The table went dead silent, and it wasn't the comfortable quiet of family enjoying a peaceful moment together. It was the sharp, awful quiet of people realizing their free ride might be coming to a sudden stop.
Joseph cleared his throat uncomfortably. Well, do you have your cards with you? You could just use those instead." "Nothing. I grabbed the wrong jacket when we left, and I have no way to pay for any of this." I looked around at everyone, making eye contact with each person. "Could we maybe split this between everyone? It's only about $35 each, which isn't too bad." The silence just stretched on, getting heavier with each second. Elizabeth shifted uncomfortably in her seat while Rick suddenly got very interested in something on his phone screen. Aunt Maureen leaned over and whispered something urgent to Tom. Finally, Joseph spoke up, his voice strained. "Well, I brought some cash with me, but not nearly that much. I wasn't really planning to pay for anything tonight." "I can throw in maybe $20, Elizabeth said quietly, avoiding eye contact. "But the kids need new school supplies this week, so I really can't afford much more than that." Rick didn't even bother to look up from his phone, just kept scrolling. I'm completely topped out until payday hits, man. Sorry about that. One by one, they all came up with their excuses, each one more ridiculous than the last. Tom said he only brought enough cash for parking and gas. Cousin Beth suddenly remembered an urgent credit card bill she had to pay tomorrow, and Cousin Mike claimed his bank account was mysteriously frozen until Monday. These were the exact same people living in nice houses, driving good cars, taking vacations, and buying expensive clothes. The same people who had borrowed thousands from me over the years without a second thought, and now they couldn't scrape together $35 each for a dinner they had just spent 2 hours enjoying. Olivia watched it all unfold with a sad, knowing look on her face, like she'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. She reached into her purse, pulled out her credit card, and said quietly, "Don't worry, I'll get it and we can figure it out later." The relief on their faces was instant and absolutely disgusting to watch. They all started talking at once, thanking Olivia like she was their savior, promising to pay her back soon, and making jokes about how forgetful I was being lately. But I wasn't listening to their words anymore. I was just watching their faces, the quick smiles that didn't reach their eyes, the way they avoided looking directly at me, the sudden rush to check their phones and talk about leaving early. Joseph clapped me on the shoulder like nothing had happened. "Thanks for dinner, buddy. This was really great. We should definitely do this more often." Elizabeth hugged me goodbye, squeezing tight. "You're absolutely the best, Ethan. I'll call you this week and we'll catch up properly." Rick gave me a fist bump and that fake smile. "Good looking out, bro. You know family comes first, right?" One by one, they all left the restaurant, walking out with full bellies and clear consciences, their wallets completely untouched by the reality of what had just happened. Olivia and I sat alone at the big empty table, surrounded by dirty plates and crumpled napkins, and the crushing weight of the truth I could no longer ignore. "I'm sorry," she said softly, reaching for my hand. "I really hoped I was wrong about all of this." I just stared at the receipt in my hands, that number burned into my brain. $438, and not one of them had even tried to help pay, not even the ones who'd borrowed thousands from me without a second thought. They've borrowed over $20,000 from me in just the past 2 years. $20,000 of my money, and they couldn't cover $35 each for one dinner they had just spent 2 hours enjoying? Olivia just nodded, her eyes full of the sadness she felt for me. "What do you want to do now?" I folded the receipt carefully and put it in my pocket like it was evidence, solid proof of what my family really thought of me and my place in their lives. I want to know what else they're hiding from me, and I meant every word. That night I couldn't sleep no matter how hard I tried. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was their faces when the bill came, the panic, the scrambling for excuses, and then the relief when Olivia saved them from having to spend their own money. I was 27 years old, and I was finally seeing my family for who they really were instead of who I wanted them to be. That next Monday morning, I walked into Miller Construction like I was seeing the place for the first time. Dad had built this company from absolutely nothing, working around the clock and bleeding for every single job until his hands were permanently stained with concrete and his back was permanently bent from lifting. When he passed and left it all to me, I didn't just inherit a business. I inherited a secret duty to every worker, every client, every supplier who pounded on us to do right by them. But I also inherited family members on the payroll that I'd never questioned, because blood was supposed to mean something. Joseph worked as a project organizer, making $45,000 a year plus full benefits. Elizabeth's husband Mike handled all the equipment management, making $38,000 plus extra payments for overtime. Rick managed all our supply orders for $35,000 plus bonuses when jobs came in under budget, and Aunt Maureen's pun Paul did safety inspections for $42,000 a year. I'd never questioned any of it because they were family, so of course they belonged in the family business that Dad had built. But as I sat in my office looking at the payroll numbers, a cold thought crept into my mind like ice water. When's the last time any of them actually earned their keep or did work that justified what I was paying them?
I pulled up Joseph's job reports from the last 6 months, and what I found made my blood run cold. Half of them were turned in late, sometimes weeks after deadlines. The ones that were on time were sloppy and missing important details that could cost us jobs. I'd been covering for him, fixing his mistakes and making excuses to clients because I thought I was being a good cousin and helping family succeed. Mike's equipment records were a complete disaster, with tools going missing for weeks, damage not being reported until it became a major problem, and rental companies constantly calling to complain about stuff not being returned on time. How much money had we lost just because he was careless with equipment that cost thousands of dollars? Rick's supply orders were always way over budget, with materials showing up late in the wrong amounts or damaged, and he never bothered to file claims for refunds or report problems until they became emergencies. And Paul's safety inspections were a complete joke, just generic lists with copied and pasted reports that looked identical from job to job, somehow missing obvious problems that could get someone seriously hurt. I was looking at 4 family members collecting full salaries for doing half-hearted work with zero consequences, while I worked myself to death covering their mistakes. Olivia found me at my desk late that night, surrounded by papers and receipts and a growing mountain of proof that made my stomach sick. "What are you doing here so late?" she asked, concern in her voice. "Learning things I should have learned a long time ago," I said, holding up a stack of receipts. "Did you know Joseph has been charging his personal shopping to the company credit card? Look at this stuff. $300 at a sporting goods store for golf clubs, $200 at a fancy restaurant with his girlfriend, $60 for gas in his personal truck that has nothing to do with work." Olivia sat down next to me and I could see she was getting angry on my behalf. "How much total?" "In just the last year, Joseph alone has cost us $12,000 in fake expenses and missed deadlines that lost us clients. Mike lost us $8,000 in damaged equipment and late fees from rental companies. Rick's mistakes with supply orders cost us $15,000 in overcharges and waste, and Paul's ignored safety problems almost got us sued twice by workers who got hurt. I was looking at 4 family members collecting full salaries for doing half-hearted work with zero consequences, while I worked myself to death covering their mistakes. What are you going to do about this?" I looked at her, my wife, the one person who tried to warn me, the one who saw right through them when love had made me blind to the truth. "I'm going to need your help with this," I said. "Because if I'm right about what's really happening here, this goes way deeper than just bad work and fake expense reports." Over the next month, Olivia and I basically became detectives investigating our own family business. She used to work as a bookkeeper before we got married, so she knew exactly what to look for, and she went through every single receipt, every expense claim, and every credit card statement like a surgeon looking for cancer. What we found made my stomach turn and my hands shake with rage. Joseph wasn't just putting personal stuff on the company card like some kind of careless mistake. He was creating fake companies with official-sounding names and paying himself for work that never even happened, stealing $28,000 over 2 years through pure fraud. Mike wasn't just careless with our tools and equipment, he was secretly renting our expensive machinery out to other construction companies and pocketing all the cash for himself, stealing $17,000 in rental money that should have been company income. Rick wasn't just bad at ordering supplies like I thought, he was getting secret kickback payments from suppliers for ordering way too much material, then selling the extra supplies on the side through online marketplaces, making off with $23,000 in stolen goods. And Paul wasn't missing safety issues by accident, he was taking straight-up bribes from other contractors to pass inspections that should have failed, making $12,000 in under-the-table payments that put our workers in real danger and could have gotten someone killed. Together, these 4 family members had stolen over $80,000 from Miller Construction in just 2 years. $80,000 that should have gone to employee bonuses, better equipment, and growing the business Dad died building, all while they were asking me for personal loans they never planned to pay back. "We need to call the police right now," Olivia said, when we had documented everything with photos and bank records. "Not yet," I said, and I could hear the anger in my own voice. "If we call them now, they'll just get lawyers, deny everything, and drag this out in court for years while they destroy evidence. I want them to confess first and admit what they did." "How are you going to make that happen?" I smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had finally learned to play the game. The same way you expose them at that dinner. We're going to give them a chance to do the right thing and see what they choose. I set up individual meetings with them each by each, not in my office where they might feel cornered, but in public places where they'd feel comfortable and confident. I started with Joseph at a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning, just the 2 of us like old times. "Joseph," I said after we got our drinks and sat down, "I've been going through the company books lately and I found some issues with your expense reports that we need to discuss." His face went pale instantly, but he tried to keep a casual smile on like nothing was wrong. "What kind of issues are we talking about here?"
I pulled out a folder filled with copies of every fake receipt, every fake invoice, every personal charge he'd put on the company card, and I laid them out on the table one by one. $28,000 worth of issues, I said quietly, watching his face change. Joseph just stared at the paper spread out in front of him, and I watched his expression go from panic to anger to calculation and finally to pure desperation as he realized he was caught. Ethan, I can explain all of the stuff. It's not what it looks like. I'm sure you can explain it, but here's what's going to happen instead. You're going to write me a detailed confession explaining exactly how you stole this money. Then you're going to resign from the company immediately, and then you're going to pay back every single penny you took. Are you completely insane? I'm family. We're blood relatives. Real family doesn't steal from family, Joseph, especially not from the business their dead uncle built with his bare hands. He leaned in closer, trying to act tough and intimidate me. You can't prove any of this would actually hold up in court. It's all circumstantial. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo that made his face go white. A picture of him shaking hands with another contractor outside a job site, a contractor who had already confirmed to me that he'd been paying Joseph cash money for inside information on our private bids.
Federal investigators love going after bid rigging schemes, I said calmly, watching him realize how deep he was in, especially when they involve government contracts like that school renovation project worth $2 million. Joseph's hand started shaking as he understood that federal charges meant federal prison, not some slap-on-the-wrist local courthouse deal. "What exactly do you want from me?" he whispered. "The truth. All of it. Written down and signed. And every dollar you stole paid back with interest." He signed a 4-page confession right there in the coffee shop, his handwriting getting shakier with each paragraph. Elizabeth's husband, Mike, was next on my list, and it was the same story with different evidence. When I showed him clear photos of our expensive equipment being used on job sites that weren't ours, with him collecting rental money that never made it to our books, he just broke down crying like a child. "We really needed the money, Ethan. Elizabeth's been having health problems and the medical bills keep piling up. Elizabeth asked me for $1,500 for medical bills 6 months ago, and I gave it to you immediately, no questions asked, while you were stealing $17,000 from the company at the same time." Mike signed his confession and promised through tears to pay back every penny even if it took him years. Rick only lasted about 10 minutes before he admitted everything. The kickback payments, the stolen materials, the fake invoices he'd been submitting. When I showed him bank records proving that his secret deposits matched exactly with the value of our missing supplies, he didn't even try to deny what he had done. "You always had everything handed to you on a silver platter," he said bitterly as he signed his name. "Some of us had to work for scraps and fight for everything." "I worked 16-hour days to build what Dad left me," I said, staring him down. "You worked those same hours to steal it piece by piece." Paul was the most pathetic of them all, and that's saying something. When I showed him photos of him taking envelopes of cash from contractors in parking lots, he actually had the nerve to ask if we could work out some kind of payment plan for the money he stole. 20 years. I'll pay it all back over 20 years. Just don't destroy my career. You'll pay it back in 2 years maximum, or I hand all this evidence to the state licensing board and you never work in construction anywhere again. By the end of the month, I had 4 signed confessions, 4 resignation letters, and written promises to repay over $80,000 in stolen money. But I wasn't finished with them yet, not even close. The family group chat absolutely blew up when word got out that Joseph, Mike, Rick, and Paul had all decided to pursue other opportunities at the exact same time, which seemed awfully suspicious to everyone. "Elizabeth, what happened? Why did everyone quit at once?" Aunt Maureen, "This seems really suspicious. Ethan, did you fire them?" Uncle Tom, "Family business should keep family employed. What's going on here?" I let them wonder and guess for a few days, let them call each other and spin their stories and work themselves into a complete panic, because I knew the 4 who confessed would eventually tell the others exactly what had happened and why. And sure enough, my phone started ringing with family members who suddenly cared about talking to me. First, it was Elizabeth, crying and apologizing and begging me not to press charges against Mike. Then came Aunt Maureen, angry and defensive, claiming Paul was being made a scapegoat for company problems. Then Uncle Tom tried to play the wise peacemaker, suggesting we could work something out as a family without involving lawyers. But the most interesting call came from Joseph himself. Ethan, we need to talk about this situation, and it needs to be in person. We met at the same coffee shop where he'd signed his confession, but this time he wasn't alone. He brought Elizabeth, Aunt Maureen, and 2 cousins I hadn't seen in months, like he was assembling some kind of intervention team. We want to make a deal with you, Joseph said, trying to sound like he had some kind of leverage. What kind of deal are we talking about? Elizabeth leaned forward, her eyes red from crying. We'll pay back all the money, every penny of it, but you don't call the police or press charges, and you give us our jobs back so we can earn the money to pay you back. I almost started laughing out loud at the pure audacity. You want me to rehire people who stole from my company so they can steal more money to pay back what they already stole? We're family, Aunt Maureen said, like that magic word solved everything. This should be handled as a family matter, not involving outsiders. When you were stealing from me for 2 years, was that a family matter? When you couldn't even help split a dinner bill, was that family first thinking? They all looked at each other uncomfortable with being reminded of their hypocrisy. That dinner thing was different, Elizabeth said weakly. We didn't have cash with us that night. But you had plenty of cash to buy a new iPhone the very next day, Olivia said quietly. They hadn't even noticed her sitting at a table behind them listening to every word. She stood up and joined us, carrying her own folder of evidence. Elizabeth, you posted Instagram photos of your shopping trip that Sunday morning. $200 at Target, $150 at Bath & Body Works for stuff you didn't need. Joseph, you checked into that expensive downtown restaurant the very next day, the one with the $40 steaks you love so much. And Maureen, your Facebook shows you bought expensive concert tickets that same week. She sat down and opened her folder, revealing printed screenshots of all their social media posts. You all had money to spend. You just didn't want to spend any of it helping Ethan. The silence that followed was long and heavy, filled with the weight of their own selfishness. Joseph tried one last desperate time. Look, we all made mistakes here, but we can fix the situation. We'll pay back all the money, every penny of it, but you don't call the police or press charges, and you give us our jobs back so we can earn the money to pay you back. I almost started laughing out loud at the pure audacity. You want me to rehire people who stole from my company so they can steal more money to pay back what they already stole? Because now we know you're watching us and keeping track. I just stared at him, this man who had taught me to drive when I was a scared 15-year-old who I had looked up to and respected my whole life, and he was now trying to negotiate his way back into a position where he could steal from me again. No, I said simply and firmly. No what? No deal, no jobs, no second chances for any of you. You confessed to serious crimes, theft, fraud, bribery, bid rigging. The only reason you're sitting here is because I haven't made that phone call to the police yet. Elizabeth started crying again, real tears this time. Please, Ethan, we're truly sorry for what we did. We'll do anything to make this right. Anything except actually pay for dinner when I needed help from my family. I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in years. Here's what's going to happen, and this is non-negotiable. You're going to pay back every dollar you stole from Miller Construction exactly on the payment schedule we agreed to. You're going to stay completely away from my business and my employees, and you're never going to ask me for money again for the rest of your lives. And what happens if we don't agree to those terms? Joseph challenged, trying to sound tough one more time. I pulled out my phone and showed them a contact I had saved, Detective Williams' Financial Crimes Unit. Then I make one phone call and you can explain your written confessions to a grand jury instead of me.
They paid back every single dollar right on schedule over the next 18 months. Joseph sold his expensive boat and got a second job driving for a delivery service at night. Mike pawned his tools and worked overtime shifts at a warehouse loading trucks. Rick moved into a much cheaper apartment and sold that motorcycle he'd been bragging about. And Paul took a roofing job for half his old salary and worked weekends to make ends meet. Every month, the checks came in the mail, some sent with bitter notes, some with apology letters, but all of them exactly on time because they knew what would happen if they missed a payment. The family group chat went completely quiet after that. No more requests for emergency loans, no more casual asks for help with bills, no more assumptions that I was their personal bank account. Suddenly, everyone was mysteriously busy whenever I suggested getting together for holidays or birthdays, which was perfectly fine with me. I had finally learned the painful difference between family who genuinely loves you and family who just loves what you can provide for them. Miller Construction took off like a rocket without them dragging it down. I hired real professionals to replace them, people who showed up on time every day, did quality work they could be proud of, and didn't treat the company like their personal piggy bank. We became more efficient, our profit margins went up dramatically, and our reputation for reliability and honesty grew throughout the industry. Best of all, I stopped getting those calls and texts from people who only remembered my phone number when they needed cash for their latest emergency. 6 months after that revealing dinner, Olivia and I went back to Romano's Italian, sat at the same table, with the same server, looking at the same expensive menu. But this time, when the check came, I paid it with money that was actually mine. Money I'd earned through honest work instead of loaned out to people who saw me as a sucker. Money I didn't have to worry about never seeing again because someone else forgot to pay me back. Any regrets about how everything turned out? Olivia asked as we walked to our car, hand in hand. I thought about it seriously. Losing family hurts, even when they completely deserve it and brought it on themselves. There were genuinely good memories mixed in with all the taking and using. Birthday parties and holiday dinners and inside jokes that would never happen again because I'd finally seen the truth. I regret that it took me so long to see who they really were, I said honestly, but I don't regret finally seeing it clearly and doing something about it. Olivia squeezed my hand tightly. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you without conditions are the ones who take the most advantage of that unconditional love. She was absolutely right, and it was a lesson I'd never forget. I had loved them without question or limits, and they had used that love like a credit card with no spending limit and no due date. But now I knew better, and Miller Construction was stronger, my marriage was happier, and my bank account was fuller because I finally understood the difference between real family and people who just happen to share your DNA. The best revenge wasn't ruining their lives or destroying them. It was building a life where I didn't need their approval, their fake presence, or their pretend affection. It was choosing the family I made with Olivia over the family I was born into by accident. And every morning when I walked into my office and saw employees who respected their jobs and each other, when I paid bills with money I had actually earned, I was reminded of the most important lesson my wife ever taught me. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones you need to protect yourself from the most. The truth doesn't always set you free, but it definitely shows you who deserves your freedom and your trust. And that dinner bill? Best $438 I ever spent, because it bought me the truth about my family that I desperately needed to see.